Hey folks, so this is going to be the third example video, or the third video in this particular section, the second example video in this section. So if you'll go all the way down, please, to example 4. This particular section is where we are using the calculator to find inverse functions. So notice that it does say to use a calculator to approximate. Part A says that we're working in radians. Part B says that we're working in degrees. So just a few little notes over to the side here. Write normally, which we already talked about in the last example video. Sometimes we're going to need to use some identities to write with sine, cosine, tangent. And the reason for that is that our calculator will do sine inverse, cosine inverse, tangent inverse. It has those buttons, but it does not have the secant inverse, the cosecant inverse, or the cotangent inverse buttons. So sometimes we have to use our quotient or our reciprocal identities to rewrite. Write it as an inverse, and then we will be using either the unit circle, or in this case, for these two examples, we'll be using the calculator. All right, so let's take example A here, and the first thing that we want to do is just simply write it normally. So we're going to say that this is the secant of some angle y is equal to -4. Let's, since we don't have, we cannot type this straight into the calculator, so this is the method that we have to follow here. So let's put it into cosine so that we can put it back into cosine inverse. So if secant is equal to -4, we know that the reciprocal is -1/4. So my cosine value is going to be -1/4. And then I can turn it back into an inverse, rewrite it as an inverse so that I'll have something to plug into my calculator. So this is going to be cosine inverse of -1/4. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is just to always have a mental plan. I didn't actually write it down here, but always, always, always have a mental plan that you have. You know that secant inverse, its restrictions are going to be the top half of the circle. You also know that secant is negative, as well as cosine is negative in the second quadrant and in the third quadrant. Well, what we want then, whatever our answer is, needs to be a second quadrant angle. This just gives us a way to check our work and just to make sure that we are doing this properly. So go ahead, type this into the calculator. Make sure that you're in radian mode. Type this into the calculator here, and you're going to get 1.8235. Now you say, is that in the second quadrant? I don't know if it's in the second quadrant. So think about your radian values in the unit circle and convert them to decibels. So we know we start with 0. We have pi over here, which is the same as 3.14159, yada, yada, yada. And then pi over 2 is going to be the same thing, excuse me, as 1.57. And then 3 pi over 2 is the same thing as 4.71. 2 pi is 6.28. So when you look at these in decimal form, it's quite easy to see that, yeah, this is a second quadrant angle, and we've done that one correctly. All right, take a look at part B. Again, there's no way for me to just type this straight into the calculator because we don't have a cotangent inverse button. So what we're going to want to do is first turn it into normal. Second, turn it into a tangent. Third, turn that tangent back into a tangent inverse so that we have a button to use for it. All right, so here we go. So we want to write it normally. And then we know that if cotangent is equal to this number, then tangent is equal to its reciprocal. Once we have it written as a tangent, then we can write it, rewrite it, convert it into an inverse. This is what I'm going to type into my calculator. Excuse me. So notice that we are in degree mode, so make sure that your calculator is changed over to the mode, and type this exact same thing here into your calculator. Go ahead and push enter. Now, before you push enter, though, I want you to think with me. Where are cotangent and tangent negative? You know that this is going to occur in second and fourth quadrants. Now, cotangent inverse, which was what my original question was, its restrictions are the top half of the circle. So I need to keep this in mind when I get an answer out. I am throwing out my fourth quadrant answer. I need to have a second quadrant answer at the end. All right, so when I throw this into my calculator, I'm going to end up with this negative 75.8129 degrees. However, that is my fourth quadrant because my calculator did a tangent inverse. Tangent inverse is the right side of the circle. But my original question is not a tangent inverse, it's a cotangent inverse. So what I need to do then is realize that these are going to be exactly halfway across the circle from each other. So all I want to do then is take my negative 75-degree angle. I want to add half a circle to it, which is adding 180 degrees. And once I add 180 degrees to that, that's going to be 104.1871 degrees. All right, that's going to close out this example. I've got one more video to go that will cover the last few examples